But thank you for being here. My name's Vija Williams, for all of you who I haven't had the privilege to meet, and I'm the Director of Growth for the Ben Kinney Companies. And the Ben Kinney Companies is a real estate company based in Bellingham, Washington. We have real estate teams all over the United States and Canada. We have 8 Keller Williams franchise brokerages here in Western Washington. We are investors in our Keller Williams United Kingdom region. We have a really thriving prop tech division. So a lot of you guys know us for Brivity, Active Rain, Quickly, Blue Roof 360, and a whole suite of great prop tech companies. We also have forward coaching. We have BKCO, mortgage, title, and escrow. So my role and what I really do day to day is I lead our brokerages, and I'm on the leadership team for mortgage, title, and escrow. One of the other things I do is Ben and I started this leadership mentoring group a little over a year ago. And it really stemmed from a high need and a high desire on our parts to train our industry to be really great leaders and to train our companies, to train people in our own companies. So we started this group and we just started doing a series of webinars, and we started a Facebook group. And we had about 1,200 people in the Facebook group last year, and we did 8 or 10 webinars, and it was great. And we were just about to kind of go into Leadership Mentoring 2.0 this year when COVID hit. And Ben and I just got very, very focused and head down in our companies, as a lot of you guys relate to, and we kind of shelved it. And a couple of weeks ago, I approached Ben and I said, I really think that it's time to bring leadership mentoring back full force. I think that the world needs leaders right now. I think we need to learn and get trained on how to be better leaders. This is the hardest leadership that most of us have ever had. And he agreed. So what we decided to do was increase membership. We now have almost 5,000 people on our Facebook page, or Facebook group, I should say. If you haven't joined, please join. It has just been an incredibly robust and active group, with a lot of people sharing lessons, with Ben and I sharing lessons that we've learned. And what we decided to do a little differently this year is to launch this with a series of one-on-one interviews. This is going to be kind of what I'm calling my real estate icon interview series. And we're going to do weekly webinars for a while. This week, I'm starting with my number one. There was no question in my mind that I was going to start with Chris Suarez. He didn't know that, but I knew that. And next week, I'm going to interview Ben Kinney one-on-one. He is not going to get the questions ahead of time. He has no idea what I'm going to talk to him about. It's going to be super raw, super real, no slide deck, just me interviewing Ben. The following week, I'm interviewing Bo and Kimber Mankiti, two of my role models who have an incredible empire in the Washington, D.C. area. And we've got a couple more lined up after that. So I hope you'll join us in all of these. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, I hope that you join that group. So it's really, really my honor to launch our second year, to launch Leadership 2.0, and to launch these webinar series with Chris Suarez. Chris is someone, Chris, you don't know this, but I've admired you from afar for a long time. And he's a CEO of Experience Real Estate, I should say. But what's happened in my life recently is that Chris and Ben Kinney just announced earlier this year that they have co-founded Place Inc., which is a whole new real estate concept and brand that we launched at the beginning of the year. And so now our worlds are a little bit collided, Chris. You know, we're in the same umbrella organization, which is really exciting. So I took that opportunity to bribe and guilt Chris into coming here today to spend an hour with me in his very, very busy schedule. So Chris, would it be okay if I gave a little background? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I don't work too often under guilt. So I'm happy to do it for you. I just don't want you to think you guilted me into anything.
It's good to know. That's good. Well, welcome. We welcome you. We're really excited that you're here. Thank you for being here. I'm going to give a little background on you because I know you well enough to know that you're super humble. And if I don't give this background, I'm not sure. I need our audience to really understand, Chris, the scope of your empire and your success. It's really impressive to me. And I don't say that lightly. I think you're probably one of the most successful real estate entrepreneurs in the nation. So you're the CEO of Experience Real Estate, which is based in Portland, Oregon. We'll talk about that a little later. You're based in Portland, Oregon. You're actually based a little outside of that now, I believe. You started off as the PDX Property Group. And I think what's amazing is you started that group, you saw the models and systems that Gary Keller taught, and within 3 years of starting that group, you netted $1 million in profit from that business, that team. Very, very few companies, no matter what sector they're in, go on to net $1 million in 3 years. It's really, really stunning. Not gross, net. So since you did that, you then went on to take that and expand nationally. So you took a very, very successful local business and you expanded nationally. And that's when you launched the Experience Real Estate Network. And last year, I know that the Experience Real Estate Network closed more than 500 million in real estate volume, right? You brought in 13 million in revenue and are on your way to becoming number 2 in our company, Keller Williams, behind Ben Kinney, right? Huge, huge growth and a massive empire. On top of that, Chris, you own 6 Keller Williams franchises in Oregon. You own Costa Rica Keller Williams, so the master license for an entire company. And I have a feeling that you own real estate assets and rental properties that I don't know about. You own a real estate coaching company, Experience Growth, and you have a 501c3 charity, Experience Giving. It's really, really impressive and really incredible. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. I don't really love listening to any of that, to be honest. And I think that's largely because I think if we get caught up in that, then we wind up doing it for that. And I think one of the secrets of our organization is we've just continued to do what we do for ourselves, our family, and those that we're in business with, and those that we serve. And honestly, it seems weird to say, but I think that if we focus on that, if it's mission based, that one day we pick up our head and we look around and say, wait, did we create this? Did we build that? And the most important word in there is probably the we, for sure. So all those numbers and all those stats and all those companies, truly, every one of them is sort of a compilation of awesome partnerships with people that I've been in business with since I started.
I love that, you just kind of went right there, showing us your humility. I mean, you just dove right in there, and I love that about you. I don't always do this when I interview people. And with you, Chris, I'd like to actually start with your childhood. And I think that understanding your childhood helps us understand a little bit how you tick. And I'm really interested to kind of unpeel the onion and learn what makes you tick. So how would you describe your childhood in a small town in New York?
Gosh, I'm way more comfortable talking about business, Vija.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I was born in Brooklyn and wound up moving out of Westchester County up to Putnam County, right? Actually a really small town called Brewster, New York. I go back now and it's funny to see that was us. I grew up with an awesome family. And I think that was really, really important. Probably the biggest impact for me as a child was my dad was a copier repairman. From the day I was born, he was a copier repairman, and until the day he retired, he was a copier repairman. Like, he never did anything else. He never grew within that company. He never wanted another job. He just went to work every day. Straight up, like literally every day. My dad, in his, I don't know how many years he was there at Xerox, but 40 something years, he took 2 sick days off, 2 in 40 years. And that's because he had knee surgery, because he kneeled in front of copiers every day. Right. And I think that I share that because so much of who I am and who I'm not is because of my dad. Like there's certain things that have built me based on that. Every single day you do it. Every single day, if your family means enough to you, you go out and you make that hour commute and you work on copiers and you come home beat and exhausted and you do it again. Now that was awesome, right?
Yeah.
Xerox actually had to change their sick day policy because when he started, you can roll those over. And knowing my dad, and that's a little bit a piece of who I am as well when we talk about profit, but I'm sure my dad's inner working is, well, if I don't take my sick days, that means I get an extra day of pay. It rolled over. So he had about a year and a half worth of pay when he retired in sick day, just saved. And they had to pay him. And so they changed the policy later and said, well, gosh, you got to take your sick day when we gave it to you. Otherwise you lose it. But that was a piece of it. I think inside of that as well is that my dad never changed who he was because he never saw a bigger life than that either for him or us, to be fair. And I think, I remember the day that I must have been, I don't remember how old, maybe 10, 11. But I remember sitting we grew up in an 800 square foot home, family of 5, and one bathroom, which was fun. But I remember standing in our kitchen with the fake brick on the kitchen. There was no dining room in that same kitchen, right? You can picture it. And I said, Dad, what's $1 million? And he said to me, and I remember he said, oh, don't worry about it. You'll never make $1 million. He said, people work their whole lives and they never make $1 million. He said, in fact, like he was clearly passionate about this. He said, in fact, you'll add up all the money you make year after year after year after year, and you'll never make $1 million. So that tells you a little bit about what he was making as well, right? 40 years for a company as a copier repairman, raising a family of 5 in New York. Yeah. That largely has created who I am.
So you've told me that before, which is why I asked it. And here's what goes through my head. Some people would rebel against that and absolutely want no consistency, no predictability, and the opposite of that in their life. Some people would just look at that as a model that's the way to live their life. How do you think that affected you? You went from there to NYU, right? When you were going to NYU, would you say you were rebelling against that or you were embracing that?
I'm not a rebel by nature. Truly, I'm not. I'm a challenger by nature. So I think at 9, at 10, at 11, I accepted it. And as I grew up and became more of who I was myself, I began to challenge a lot of beliefs that were shared with me. Some I found to be truth, and some I found to be false. And I think that's an important period for all of us to go through, is challenging, right, what truth has been handed to them and truly making that decision. I think that's the big deal, is that we have to decide, right, what is the value of that upbringing and what is not. Like I'll share that, we were a step family as well. So at 5 years old, my dad married my mom. Many people don't know that because I always refer to my mom as my mom. Like she did everything for me. She stepped in and she truly was my mom. My mom, my birth mother was killed when I was 10 months old. And my brother was 20 months old. So I think about that. And that is why I honor my dad, because I think a lot of dads, and that is honestly that made me who I am as well. Because I don't for a second take that for granted. Like my life could be very different. My dad had a 20-month-old baby and a 10-month-old baby, and he was a single dad, right? As a copier repairman, and he made it work. He kept us and he was there. And so I think that made me too. Right? That again, just showing up for people. I am, and I know this word is an interesting one recently, but I am fiercely loyal to human beings. And I think that has worked well for me in business as well.
Yeah, you are. As you know, as prep for this interview, I myself talked to 6 or 7 people that are really close to you, and that came up a lot. So the people that are really close to you think of you that way as well. Fascinating, Chris. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing. That's really that's really changes my framework. Actually, that's fascinating. What's also fascinating is, you grew up in this environment where your dad was like, you're never, don't even worry about what $1 million brings. And you went to a really prestigious college with a very ambitious, major. I mean, you went to NYU as a pre-law major. And I think a lot of people that maybe were in your situation would have gone to a, more local, college and maybe specialized in a trade. What do you think caused you to do that at such a young age? I mean, at 18.
If I'm being honest, and I think, the only question you asked me prior to this was, I just want to get to understand who you are, right? Like what makes you tick. I think that all of us need to figure that out first. And for me, and I don't want to go too deep there, but for me, I think there were lots of instances when I was very young that I questioned whether or not I was worth it, whatever it was. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're in an environment, and I don't want this reflective of my parents, but if you're in an environment of, is that good enough? Is that good enough? Is that good enough? Is that good enough? And I'm being nice. It may have more been like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. I think that some people will accept that, and that hurts their self-worth. And that's something that they deal with for years and years and years and years. And for me, I don't, this about me. I don't take things personally. Like people can say terrible things. Like that is everybody has a right to that opinion. So for me, that was a challenge to prove to myself and anybody else that even cared to watch that I was worth it. And I could do that if I wished to. So you're right. I didn't necessarily quote unquote belong in that school. And that's because I was one of the people that heck couldn't afford it. But I got a scholarship there, right? Like free ride, books paid for, everything paid for. It's the only way that I could have ever gone there. Now, I didn't graduate. And I don't share that often either, but I was, I think 3 or 4 credits shy, and there's a reason why I left, but of ever graduating. But for me, I think it was that drove me, that yes, I could get there. Yes, my parents would have, they did not want me to work. Actually, during high school, they wanted me to focus on school. They didn't want me to necessarily work during college either. Like my dad would do everything he could to make ends meet to get us educated. And I was going to, for me, part of my drive was to prove that I was worth it. And part of my drive was to make sure that I didn't put pressure or financial stress on my dad. And so, so that's what I did.
Do you think that you loved learning back then, or it was more of a job? Did that start your love of learning?
No, I loved it.
You still loved it, even as a young
I think
kid?
that is definitely part of who I am. Like I often tell people, if I could get paid to be a professional college student, I would. If I could get paid to read books all day, I would. Like in a way, I feel like now I get to, and that is part of my job, is I get paid to read books. But yeah, I'm that guy. Like I wasn't popular. I definitely trended toward the nerd in school.
So how many books have you read in the last 4 or 5 years, Chris?
I read a book every single week, and that is a challenge for sure. I have a lot going on in my world, in my business world. I have 2 little girls, and so part of my sacred time to me is reading, and I think I owe that to my people as well. So every year for the last 4 years, it's a minimum of anywhere from 52 to 64 books.
That's absolutely stunning to me and impressive. Do you physically read them? Are they paper books? Are they Kindle? Are they Audible? What does reading mean? Do you skim? Do you actually read? When you define reading a book in
Yeah, I
this
think that's a
context?
good question. And I actually think, right, trying to figure out like, how do we do that? Ben and I talk a lot about this because he listens to as many books as I read, truly.
Hmm.
I don't learn in an auditory way. So I don't have an Audible account. I don't use, right? Like I actually read. So I split my time 50-50. 50% of my books I buy in print. And that's because I love books. And so I want books around me. That's important. That's my environment. And then 50% of the time I'm reading them digitally. Some of that's for the sake of my eyes as well. But my rhythm is this. People say, gosh, you have such an amazing memory for what you read. And I really don't. But I have an Evernote file for every book I've ever read. And every book I read, if I'm digitally reading it, I'm taking notes while I do it. If I read it in page form, I'm circling and writing, and then I go back and I literally transcribe notes into Evernote. And that's because I believe that, I actually believe that if I continue to do that, no one can catch up. Kobe Bryant in an interview, right? It was that video that came out. I think Gary
Yeah.
sent it around. And my biggest takeaway from that is this. As he said, he would go out and practice more than anybody, practice more than anybody, practice more than anybody. And that's awesome, right? We can all say, I'll work harder than everybody. That's what I used to say. But his takeaway was this. See, now people have understood his model and they say, oh, it's practice 3 hours a day. But the fact is nobody can catch up. Right? Because he actually, he's committed and consistent, just like my dad was, right? And I'm committed and consistent, just like my dad was. See, no one can catch up. Like if that is my competitive advantage in my world, if I need one, and heck, like my intelligence isn't my competitive advantage, my looks aren't my competitive advantage is my consistency. And so that is just one piece of my consistency. I've always read so that it's easy for me and I love it. So that's a win. But I literally, I think that Evernote file of literally hundreds and hundreds of books has incredible value to the world, but the greatest value that I gave myself was that commitment.
You know what I love about what you just said? You are so clear. You have so much clarity, your competitive advantages. You are just so crystal clear about it, and you just work that system. You're like, my competitive advantage is my consistency, and that's who I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to live. That's what I'm going to do. As for that Kobe Bryant video, what struck me, I know that video very well. I talk about it a lot. What struck me is your dad's vacation time, his accrual, his year and a half. Because Kobe said in that video, they can't catch up. At a certain point, that extra hour or two a day is physically impossible to catch up on when it's time over task, over time, over task, over time. So it's one thing to try to catch up in a month. It's another thing once you're at one year, 2 years, 5 years, the time has passed. You can never catch up. And I mean, your dad's vacation accrual is just such a tangible example of that, Chris. That's fascinating to me.
I think sometimes the reason why we don't, I was just talking about this with actually an event that Kimber ran for her region, but I think it's because we look at activity and it gets super linear instead of being compounding in our mind. We want massive growth. And interestingly enough, none of my growth has been massive quickly. Truly, like there is nothing that I've done that one day someone said, because I think that's explosive and I think that's recognizable and then everybody knows you. The fact is, and I joke with Ben because everybody knows Ben and nobody knows me. And I'm good with that. But I've always said my goal in building a business is to be what I would consider the best kept secret. And interestingly enough, over time, I literally knew what I needed to do to have a competitive advantage. And that competition was with myself. Clearly, that's just who I am. But then one day you wake up and you realize that, hey, you've built you've built the business closest in volume and revenue, right? To someone that did it a different way with just a much bigger personality. It's just who I am though, as well. That's why Ben and I work so well together too, though.
Yeah, you guys do really work well together. So let's kind of continue this continuum. So you grew up in a small town, New York, you know, and you go to NYU and you're a pre-law major. But I'm talking to you in Portland, Oregon. So I'm curious what happened to get you from pre-law at NYU to Chris Suarez, real estate mogul in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot happened. If I could pin it down to a couple things, one was 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And I was in the city at the time. Well, I was out of the city that day. I worked in the city that at the time in the American Express building, which was the third building that fell, by the way. But I was house sitting that morning in Westchester County for some friends that had a dog. So I needed to stay there later that morning. Otherwise, I'm usually in the building by 6 a.m. And I stayed to watch the dog, and that was perspective shifting for me, clearly, as it should be. And I made this decision that was all of what I was building and working on worth it? I think a lot of people ask that question that time. This time is somewhat like that time, actually, in terms of a global, right, disaster. Mm-hmm. That was a very localized disaster that I happened to both feel the negative benefits, but the positive benefits of. And I
think of 9/11 as a national disaster, actually.
Well, that's true.
I think of it as I think it's a very similar comparison to this. I agree with you.
Yeah, you're right. I was being a New Yorker, because New Yorkers think the world centers in New York. But at the time, I just really couldn't see myself doing what I was doing, right? Which was this wake up call that I'm my dad right now. Like, I had a job at a law firm, right? I was the same thing every day, right? Got the paycheck. Like, I was going to repeat history if I didn't make a change. And it was kind of a whim, right? On September 11th, that happened. I quit my job, and for the next 45 days, I volunteered down at, Ground Zero. And on November 15th, I decided to move across the country.
So were you still at NYU at the time?
No, I had left. I had left because an attorney that I was interning for had this great idea to open up a title company for co-op insurance, which actually, I'm not going to get into my thought about insurance, but one, it wasn't required. So I was selling something that wasn't necessary, because co-ops aren't real property. It's personal property. So you didn't need title insurance, but he rolled out this idea that you did. Now it actually caught on, and now everybody needs title insurance for their co-ops. But I left school early to help him launch that company and work at that company for a bit of time.
So that explains that was your first exposure to real estate then. I never knew that. That makes sense. But what on earth took you to Portland, Oregon, Chris?
Yep. I interned with a real estate attorney, and honestly, what got me into real estate sales, because I had my real estate license out in New York, is I used to, can you hear the landscaper? Okay, good. I used to do the closings in New York. So I would actually represent the title company. I would go out, I would navigate the closings at the table. And I recognized a few things. All the attorneys I worked for were miserable. So hopefully none of them are watching this, but they were just miserable human beings. They were unhappy. They drank too much. It wasn't the right environment for me. It just wasn't who I was. The real estate agents looked super happy. Like, their clients were happy. The buyers were happy. The sellers were happy. Like, it was all in one room. I also realized the checks were going the wrong way. Like, the big checks went to the real estate agents and the small ones went to the attorneys. And I was like, something's not adding up. So I got my real estate license, and I was selling real estate in New York while I was working for that attorney as well, the title attorney.
Okay, so that explains real estate, but not Portland, Oregon.
No, I mean, that's probably, the short story is I had met a couple people while in New York. I knew two people in Oregon. One was a buddy and one was a girl. And so I said, well, there's a girl and a buddy. I'm gonna move to Oregon. And
there's always a girlfriend or a boyfriend involved in these moves, Chris.
But 30 days later, I didn't know her anymore. And so then it was, do I go back or do I make this work? And I don't know if that came up in your questions, but I'm a stubborn human being, for sure. So is all my family. And so I was going to make it work. I wasn't going to go back to what I was doing. So I found myself as a party of one in a brand new state, and right, real estate's what I knew.
So it wasn't necessarily like you landed in Portland and said, I love this city. It's where I'm going to, spend the rest of my life. It was more stubbornness that you were not going to fail.
Yeah. In fact, I landed in Eugene, not even Portland.
Oh, wow.
I was supposed to move. I'd never been to the town that I was going to move to, but I decided to move to Coos Bay, Oregon, which is, I think, population 3. And when I went back, when I actually went down there for the first time, I was like, I can't believe I almost moved here from New York. But anyway, I wound up settling in Eugene, and I lived in Eugene for about 5 or 6 years. And that's where I built my first real real estate business.
All right, so let's talk about that. So I'm really curious what a real estate icon's first year in real estate looked like.
My first year in real estate, I think I sold about 26 homes, 27 homes, something like that. At the time, right? Like,
that's a lot. That's really a lot.
Years ago, is a good business, right? It was more money than my dad ever said I was going to make, right? So it was a good first year. But honestly, it was just who I was built to be. Like I was built to be a worker, and that's why I love this business, because it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, how you started, where you started. You can be successful if you're willing to be a worker.
You were built to be a worker, or you were built to be successful?
I was built to be a worker. I created myself to be successful, I think.
Did you ever doubt that you were going to be successful, or have you entered everything you've done just with complete confidence you're going to succeed?
Do you know what's really funny? And I'll never share the picture, but my sister reminded me just recently. My family, I keep my business life and my family life quite separate, believe it or not. Like, my family's not on social media, so they don't really understand what I do in business, right? They know I'm a real estate agent. I love that. That's how they see me. But my sister sent me this picture the other day from our high school yearbook. Remember, it's a step family. So me and my brother were 10 months apart, and my sister was 5 months older than me and 5 months younger than my brother. So 2 months out of the year, we're all the same age, right? So me and my sister were in the same grade growing up. And she sent me the picture, which was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, because we both got voted as most likely to succeed in high school. Like, what a joke, right?
Yeah.
But so I had to take this picture with my sister for the high school yearbook. Not a shining moment, but it's interesting, right? Because it was and nobody really wanted to be that, right? You didn't want to get voted as that, because like, that's the nerd, right? The most likely to succeed was like, you don't really want to be that. Sure enough, there you go.
I don't know, Chris, that tells me a lot about you. I mean, because you're humble, I feel like I have to really unpeel the onion to get to the root of this. You said something earlier in the interview that I didn't follow up on, but I'm going to say it now. When you said, I think it's natural to start challenging things at age 9 to 11, that is really young to be challenging things. That's probably a sign of a really, really high IQ, actually. Anyway.
It's interesting, Vija. I'll share one other random fact that I don't typically share, because you asked me about, like, what did you read and were you a reader? I have a book still in my library, right, at 10 years old. And I read this book, and it's kind of a funny book. The title of the book is Mankind's Search for God. And I think back, and
at 10 years old, you read that at 10.
And it was dive into world religion, right? Like, just an understanding of like, what is God? Who is God? Like, so I'm definitely, like, I definitely am the kid that will question and challenge, but it also has, I think that's where my stubbornness comes from. Some people are stubborn and they're just obstinate and then they're rude and they're just not fun to be around. Like, some of my family are that way. But my goal was to be stubborn because my belief system was so strong. I'm open and willing to have conversations about anything and challenge anything, any belief, but I'm pretty resolute and firm in what I've decided to be truth.
Wow. That's incredible to me. That gives me a lot of insight, actually. So, so you started real estate, and let's fast forward, Chris. Katie Benson, who is still with you today, got you over to the brokerage you're at now, Keller Williams, and you started experience in, well, I shouldn't say that. You started PDX Property Group, right? In 2009, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Started PDX Property Group, and you learned systems and models, right? You read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, and you read the blueprint, and you started PDX Property Group, and you followed the blueprint. Why is it so many people, millions of people have read that book? Why do you think it is that you read that book and you followed it hook, line, and sinker, and you succeeded doing in 3 years what 1.3 million realtors in the US may never do?
Probably two reasons. One, I am willing to change my behavior anytime it needs to be changed, right? Like behavioral change is a big deal to me. And I think that I needed to change, not who I was, but I needed to change my behavior the minute I became part of an organization or company that taught what was possible. So all of a sudden, I'm part of a company that says, hey, I know your dad said you'll never make $1 million, but here's a model that says you will. So I was willing to challenge that, right? Behavioral change. The second piece is, and this is probably what drives behavioral change, is we need accountability. I don't care who you are. I'm a fairly driven person. I'm a fairly self-disciplined, self-motivated person. If I don't have accountability in my world, I probably would be the guy still living in Eugene, not smoking, but right, whatever people in Eugene do, reading books all day, right? Like on campus. However, prior to me launching PDX Property Group, I stepped into a team leader role, right? Within our organization, that ultimately is a CEO of a company that coaches real estate agents. Their job is to help people grow their business. And I coached that red book for about 1.5 years. I told people this could be done. And so when I was asked to step back into production and actually then become the OP or the operating principal or the owner of that office, it was with the one caveat that I would model what I coached and taught. And so for me, I didn't have an option. I was not allowed to do anything other than what I taught. Fair? Like I was only allowed to do what that book said because I had always told, I'm very congruent with who I am. If I say do something, I'm going to do it. And so I had told 100, at that time 100, I look at this as 100 agents. I told this is the best model. 200 eyeballs were then watching me as to what I was going to do. It forced me into behavioral change. That is my secret, right? It isn't who I was. Like it really was. I was willing to change behavior. I added accountability. Done.
Chris, have you always been like that, or did that just come with experience and getting knocked over a few times and maturity?
I think I grew up with people watching me, right? Like, and sometimes I felt like, oh my gosh, would you just stop watching what I do right and what I do wrong, right? Like go back to my, like, that's why it's cool that you went there. That's just, I was raised that way, that I was going to be accountable to what I did and how I did it, right? Like we had drawer checks in my house. Like, did you fold your clothes the right way or not? No, dumped on the floor, folded again. Like make your bed a certain way. Interestingly enough, now there's books and podcasts about make your bed. So I don't regret how I was raised. It actually was a competitive advantage later on.
That's fascinating to me, and also sheds insight. That you're pretty hardwired that there is a system and a model and a way to do everything. And so it sounds to me like this is the way we do our drawers for real estate, and I'm gonna box myself in with accountability and make sure that I change my behavior to do it. That's amazing. So you started Experience, you have phenomenal, or PDX, you have phenomenal success, and then you launched into Expansion. What made you want to take a successful business locally, right, and launch it around the United States?
Want is the wrong word for me because I didn't want to, but I needed to. And the reason why is because while I was building one company, I got into business with people that were incredibly talented and I loved a lot. Like I really cared about them, not just the business or not just my financial world. Remember, I grew up living on very little. I can live on very little. So I had made enough money, probably, right, 2 years after $1 million, I've made enough money to live for the rest of my life. So it became less about that. And more about the fact that if I did not grow, if that business didn't get bigger, if the world didn't get bigger, then I was going to have people leave me. And I did, right, initially because the world was too small. It was just my world. It was PDX's world. I named my company, right, in a way that was going to stay small. And that's where Experience came in, and the name change and everything began to get bigger for the nature of the fact that I wanted to stay in business with people that are still now leaders in my company. John Powers is one of them. Katie Benson was one of them. Both of them were with me way back then when I started PDX. John Powers was my first hire. I guess technically Katie was, because she was my team leader at that office, who then, right, helped me hire John, who then now we all work together, leadership team, and you get to work with them too.
Well, that first hire has been auctioning off that photo on chat, I'll have you know.
What are you talking about?
The photo that you said will never get out. Mr. Powers is offering that photo, and there's a bid, and it's up to $150, FYI. Good job, John. So let's talk about the name Experience Real Estate. Because one thing I know about you is you have I call them DHBs, Chris. It's a deeply held belief. You have a deeply held belief, right, that experiential living it's really, I think your raison d'etre. I think it's your mission in life is to have an experiential life and make sure that others around you do too. Is that correct? Would you say?
Yeah, 100%. It's the only reason why I do what I do.
So where did that come from?
Two places. I think the first place it came from was watching my family not, right? Like and some of that, you do need money for some experiences, for some types of experiences, right? And we went on one vacation as a family, growing up. We went to Disney. My parents saved box tops of cereal boxes and got free tickets to Disney. And then we drove from New York to Florida to get there. Awesome experience, right? But it was the one experience that I remember because it was the one experience that they were able to create. Fast forward, and I realized that even in real estate early on in Eugene, I was falling into the same thing that my dad had become, right? I didn't really care about the money that I was making. I loved work. And so same thing every day. So I found myself married, and we had just built a house. And a year later, my wife really, it was just a reality check. We are dreadfully honest people. And she said, hey, listen, you're married to two things. Like, you're married to your business and you're married to me. And unfortunately, you only get to be married to one thing, right? And she goes, and I just don't want to step in the way of anything that you're so wildly passionate about, this real estate thing. She goes, this is not like this weird ultimatum. It's just, I feel like I'm getting in the way. And that, to me, I realized that the money was just sitting in the bank. We weren't doing anything with it. I didn't like going on vacation. I just wasn't, I wasn't raised to enjoy that. I didn't actually like taking time off. Like, none of that mattered to me. My wife grew up very differently, and she was raised where, vacation wasn't 1 week, it was 1 month. And she grew up in a very different economic world. She was from Mexico, and they spent more time out of Mexico in different countries. And really, I recognized that our worlds had just collided, but she forced me to ask, like, what's more important? Is it this relationship, Or is it what I love so much, real estate and building this business, and probably, right, dealing with self-worth, like all those things that we talked about earlier. And 4 days later, I think, we left Eugene. So I was living in Eugene. My real estate business was there. I moved. We literally, right, packed up, house we had just finished building, put it on the market, and we moved to Portland. And I moved to get away from a business that I didn't know how to fix or control. But that was this beginning of, hey, whatever I created, whatever money I made, it was valueless if I wasn't experiencing life. And I made this commitment that from that point forward, I was going to live experientially. I was going to make sure that that work wouldn't become my life, but work was integrated as part of it, because I do love it and I enjoy it, but that there was experiences that I was enjoying along the way. And the purpose of the work was the experience.
You know, Chris, it's fascinating because I'm seeing a definite pattern. You make a decision and you make very, very dramatic changes in your life to match those decisions, right? And a lot of them coincidentally have to do with physical moves. It's fascinating. You know, you left NYU to go work for someone who had a startup that had an idea that excited you. You physically moved from New York City to go to Oregon to kind of change your life, right? You started your real estate career, you moved companies and you moved roles, you physically moved a few times. It's interesting to me that you're making these really big, important decisions, and then you back it up with a lifestyle decision.
You know, I think some at the moment felt that those decisions were unstable, really, right? When I moved from New York, they thought, gosh, it's like, don't freak out, like the world isn't ending. But I wasn't making it for that. When I left Eugene, I remember my broker at the time, I loved her dearly, said, but you've built this huge business. This is crazy. Like, just, right, well, let's figure this out. But for me, right, I love James Clear's quote that environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. And for me, I make my environment, the only thing I would change about it is, for me, it is very visible. I will not let environment be invisible. I will make sure that environment is very, very visible to me, so that it's a choice, and I will architect my environment or change it if it needs to be, in order for me to get to where I need to go or be who I need to be. Yeah, so those changes, like, change doesn't scare me. And yet I'm other people would say, gosh, he's super methodical and like overly calculated about like decisions he makes, and sometimes he overthinks things. And yet, again, if I believe it, I'll do anything. I'll burn something down. I'll build something new. Like, I love massive change. Ask my wife.
So with all of that said, I think that you should talk about Costa Rica, because when we talk about experiential living, I know that it really shifted you fundamentally when you went to Costa Rica for the first time, right? 2014, I think it was.
Yeah, so I was, I think 3 years into that business, clearly was not stepping away a whole lot. Like, it was hard for me to think that I was going to go anywhere right? We started vacation, so that was good, but it was like 1 week, 10 days, and let's get back. And I was challenged by my coach at the time to go away for a month. Go away for a month, right? Check in when you need to, but see what happens. Do you really own a business or not? And so I went down to Costa Rica with all the plans of doing like that daily check-in, right? Staying connected. We went down to do some volunteer work. One of my clients owned some property down there. That's how it originally happened. So real estate got me there, interestingly enough. He had built a school for kids. Lots of kids don't have education because they just don't have the money nor the teachers to do that. So we were going to help get kids into school, right? And help fund this school from elementary school to high school. And that's been a big part of what my family is doing down there. And my kids have been involved. Well, I get there and I realize that this is way more remote than I thought, that there is no internet. I have dial-up at a local resort that I had to drive to and literally plug in straight up and listen to the dial tone that we had given up for the days of like Juno, right? Like I'm like, what in the world?
So I remember that, the handshake, the dial tone and then the handshake.
I have no access. And interestingly enough, that was highly stressful for the first 7 to 10 days of just this, like, I can't really communicate. And what I realized is my wife said something to me that hit me. She goes, you have moved like 3 times and starting business over 3 times. What's the worst that can happen? The whole thing falls apart. Like it all crumbles. You've started over before. Like you've built from new before. So who cares? We'll always be okay. And that allowed me to chill and realize that life is different. And yet it is the only way to know if you have a business. When I went back, sure, things broke, right? Like I remember John, John will remember someone someone quit and hired themselves back in the month that I was gone. Like all chaos broke loose. And yet what's interesting is clients still got served. We sold more houses that month than any month in the previous 12. Like it was fine. And that changed my perspective on what mattered, but also being down there in the culture of the country changed my perspective, right? It is labeled as the happiest country, right, on earth in the book Blue Zones. And they said it's because of a few things. It's because of health. So in times of uncertainty in health, it's hard to be happy at times, but it's because of health. It's because of community and family, right? That's all they care about. And it's because of faith, right? They had this faith in the future. It's a very faith-based country. So those 3 things led to happiness. And honestly, when I'm there, I mean, here I'm happy too, but there is just, it allowed me to see just a different way of life in Costa Rica.
So do you think that you sort of change when you go there, and that you just live more experientially, that you equate Costa Rica with that Chris, and that's what makes it so special?
I think so. I think that's probably right. And I think now my intention is to live that way everywhere. I think as much as anything, it's this reminder of being forced to, because environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior, right? So that's
I share that with you, Chris. I think I say it to people all the time. If your environment doesn't match your goals, you're in the wrong environment. I agree with you. I even noticed you talking about it with your books. I happen to feel the same way. I like physical books in my environment. So I can see that with your physical, you removing yourself to Costa Rica. I think that you'd internalize your environment. In fact, I think I reflect back to the letters you write, the beautiful letters that you post, that you write your team. A lot of them have to do with the environment that you're in.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I think I find my greatest lessons in the environments or the experiences that I either allow myself to have, or push myself to have, or force myself to have.
Yeah, that's right. So how does wealth fit into this equation? Because, in order to have the ability to go to Costa Rica for a week, we have to have that conversation of wealth, right? We have to fund that life, that experiential life.
Yeah. So for me, if I'm going to do something almost in any area, like I'm going to do it big. And part of that is just a commitment conversation with myself, right? When I first went down there, I went for a month. When I next went down there, I went there for 2 months. When I next went down there, I went for 3 months, right? So, right, short of this year, which we're not allowed into the country right now, but short of this year, I would normally be down there for about 4 or 5 months out of the year we live there. You don't do that, you're right, unless you build wealth. I think that took me a little bit longer, right? Because of my relationship with money growing up, and the fact that, to be honest, one day I woke up and my team was netting $1 million, but remember, I was making money outside of that team anyway. And so $1 million shows up in the bank, and $2 million is now in the bank, and $3 million in the bank, and $4 million in the bank, right? 7 years in, I'm not using that money. And what I realized some years ago is I better learn about wealth, or else I'm going to be really dumb when it comes to money. For me, if I don't have necessity, I won't do something, right? We revert to our natural self, perhaps. And so I will put myself into situations or positions where I need wealth, where I need more money than I have. Otherwise, I don't need it, and we tend to slow down. What that means is properties that I've built, Yeah. Do they at times put pressure on me to show up and continue to produce? Absolutely. So you're right. Like I've invested, I've developed, I've built, right? We own homes in different countries. And that actually forces me to continue wealth building. Now, real estate happens to be a great vehicle for wealth building as well. But I think that that was the brainchild as well for experience giving, because at a certain point in time, right, if my number is 100 million or 50 million or 150 million, that if I had that, I'm good. Experience giving is never good, right? There's never enough because there's always someone else in need. So when we launched our public charity, it was this mission that I had that I believe giving is experiential. Like if you have money to give, that's an experience and it feels amazing. But for me now, that's easy. Honestly, right? Initially, I had that goal of grossing 1 million and then netting 1 million and then giving 1 million. And I truly and honestly can check off each of those boxes now. So after that, right after you've given 1 million, I have to take a step back and say, hey, what's harder for me? It's harder for me to give of my time. It's harder for me to give in projects and do work. And I think that my mission behind that is to continue to fund it. So I need to continue to build wealth to fund it, but also continue to focus on what's most important, and in giving brings happiness, right? Because giving builds community. And so that is actually what largely drives me right now, aside from, right, giving to our people, which I need to create a lot of wealth for them because I need to make a lot of millionaires.
Okay, I love that. So describe your relationship with money growing up and describe it now.
I think growing up, I wanted it because I didn't have it. And I thought, right, to me, $20 was a lot of money, right? I never got an allowance. So, and my relationship with it now is the more I have, the more good I can do. The more I have, the more people's lives I can change. Like I look at my organization today, our organization today, and it has the 13 million in revenue from last year from that one side of the business. Interestingly enough, I look at that and say, do you know how many families ate every night because of it, or had vacations because of it, or bought houses because of it, or have 6 figures saved in an account because of it? And there's other people in my world that are not there yet. And I wake up every day. The reason why I love expansion is because I have partners now. I have partners that I am committed to helping them net $1 million now. Like that is, if they only partner with us because they said, well, you know, my definition of leadership is this, that my job is to provide a path to someone's preferred future. So if you and I sit down and have this conversation about what's your preferred future, what does that look like? What are you doing? What do you have? Then my job as a leader, if I say, yes, let's partner, yes, follow me, is I'm going to get you there. Let me show you the path to the preferred future. So understand, I said my world is built on accountability. I have 50 partners right now that their preferred path is to have a real estate business that nets $1 million. That is incredible accountability and keeps me waking up every single morning with an incredible drive.
Is that how you align yourself with your partners? You make sure that their path is something that's going to drive you every day?
Yeah, we have to be on the same path, and I have to believe that I can get, I've been honest with some people that said, hey, I want to partner. But see, their path, like their preferred future is not down my path. It really could be someone else's organization. That is, and I have shared that. That is that they have a better path for that. I have a path that says, hey, I want to make a lot of money. I want to build a big business, but I better be living experientially while I do it. For some, it's actually not making more money. It's making the same money, but living experientially. I'm good with that, and I have a path for you. For some, it's actually how to live experientially, but because I do, I have no money. I have a path for you. That's what my check-in is.
That's fantastic. What are your superpowers, Chris?
I think well, commitment. I mean, I am willing to do something for a very, very long time, right? Through delayed gratification. And that to me is a superpower because I believe it's a skill most of us we struggle with, right? So it's a separator for me. I'm 20 years into this industry. Like I think some people are like, wow, you built that really quick. No, no, no. Like I built it over 20 years. And honestly, my first 20 years of life was my parents, right? Building something as well. So delayed gratification is one. And I actually think in business, um, I love studying something incredibly complex and simplifying it. Like taking something complex and complicated, MREA seems complicated, and being able to communicate it in a really simple way. That goes with my personality. I'm a simple person. I really am pretty simple. Um, so I would say that's a superpower.
Okay, what else?
Um, I actually think I'm able to stay calm amidst like it. I don't know that any of my people have ever heard me yell. The world doesn't care if I'm angry, so why be angry? I truly, truly believe, right? No one really does. I truly believe that that is a superpower, though, which is really just controlling emotion, perhaps. And maybe I think sometimes we can grow up in volatile situations and we reflect the situation we grew up. And other times we say no. Like we make a choice that I am going to be calm and I'm going to be still. I'm going to be able to solve problems in a calm way. I think that was a promise I made to myself the minute I had a child. And to this day, like I grew up in a regimented, disciplined environment. I'm not lenient as a parent, but we talk about everything in a calm way. So I think, for me, that's a superpower.
Do you think are you volatile in your head and you've just controlled your behavior, or have you controlled the actual emotion?
Um, I would like to say I've controlled the emotion. And I think like everybody, I have moments of definitely not controlling it in my head. Is that fair?
I've seen you angry. I've seen you angry once. One time. That's it. Just one time.
I definitely, my people know me so well that if something is under my skin, or I talk faster, I move faster, yes, like people know. It's just that I'm able to have very real conversations and unemotional conversations when there's a lot of emotion in the situation.
You are the Chris I know is extremely calm and does make the complex simple. I agree. Would you like to know what other people in your world think your superpowers are?
Well, I'm thinking whether I want to or not, you'll tell me. So, sure.
That is true, Chris. That is true. So as part of this series, everyone we interview, and I'm going to do it with Ben, I'm going to do it with Bo and Kimber. I'm going to take selected people in their world, and in your case, in your world, and ask them what they think your superpower is, because I think it's a really interesting exercise to get your perception of yourself and then what others see you as, right? I think it's a really interesting exercise. And in fact, Ben Kinney and I did it on ourselves last night. I gave him what I thought his superpowers were, and he gave me what he thought mine were. And this all stemmed from an activity I did with a group of my girlfriends. We call ourselves the Dolls. In February, we all got together at one of our retreats we do twice a year, and we spent some very powerful time with someone in the hot seat sharing what we thought their superpowers are. And it impacted me deeply. It impacted all of us deeply, right? So I just wanted to model that. I thought it was a good exercise, and my leadership team doesn't know this yet, but we're going to do it together as a leadership team as well. So starting with Ben Kinney. Ben Kinney thinks that you are very smart. He's really impressed with how extremely prepared you are for whatever you commit to. He said he's really impressed how you show up. He thinks you're incredible with systems. You create a system for everything, and that you're a very out front leader. He thinks you do a really, really good job of being out in front of your people. John Powers, the first thing John said is, without even missing a beat, was that your superpower is your intelligence and your ability to avoid chocolate chip cookies. So then I went on to ask him, I said, is Chris really disciplined? Is that why you say that? And he said, he said, you are viciously strict with your self-discipline. And he said, watching you on the Whole30 is mind-blowing, how well you adhere to that. He said, you are smart, kind, the most dedicated and hardworking person he knows. And he said that you are really, truly internally driven to live experientially and to see others succeed. I then asked Katie Benson what she thought your superpowers were. She said, you have a ridiculous work ethic, you have extreme focus, a heart for developing others, and the ability to simplify the complex. So we were starting to see alignment with some of what you're saying and what they're saying. Leslie Hilbert said, you have super reading powers. Your ability to read, comprehend, process, and teach an insane amount of books is crazy. And at one time, she thought you had a photographic memory. She said she just was convinced of it.
And then I told her my system.
Oh, good. Well, good. You're the Evernote system, which I'm going to talk to you more about in detail. That's great. Holly Priestner. Your focus and commitment to the mission, you deliver on it all day, every day. Your consistency is definitely your superpower. She said that, your consistency in who you are, your schedule and your messaging, how you treat others, and your commitment to the mission. Creativity. He teaches us to fall in love with boredom. Clearly, his consistency with models and systems have allowed him space and time for creativity. P&L, you have P&L skills with a Z. And coaching, you have the ability to turn any moment in any day into a coaching message. And for me, just getting to know you, Chris, that really struck me. That's kind of how I think of you. I think you're a really good observer, and you don't miss a lot. And you take mundane activities and situations, and you turn them into teachable and coachable moments. That's something I've learned from you. I asked Ross Clausen what he thought your superpower was, and he says, Chris is a calm, clear communicator. As a result, he's really easy to listen to and hear. What's even better is that Chris is thoughtful and thinks through what he's about to say before he says it. And lastly, Jolene Snell taught me a new word this morning. I asked her your superpowers, and she said gentle fierceness, time hacker, and Philomathian, which means lover of learning. There you go.
Awesome.
What other people think. What do you think when you hear all that?
That it's a challenge to continue to live into those superpowers, right? And to continue to display them and to build them. I think that's a really cool exercise, right? It puts those eyeballs in front of you, right? When we have the faces of the people that you're leading, or the faces of the people that have believed in you, or partnered with you, or signed on to live life with you, when you have those faces and eyeballs watching, it is what all of us need to continue to show up.
Yeah. Well, you showed up today. I really, really thank you for letting me go there with you. We spent a little over an hour together. I apologize, but I felt like we needed to finish the arc of what we were talking about, so I let it go a little long. Thank you, Chris. And if we want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that? Is there a website? Is there an email address?
Yeah, my email works just fine. It's Chris at, and then PDX, like the Portland Airport, pdxpropertygroup.com. It's my first real estate email, and still have it today.
Still there, still ticking. Well, we appreciate you. I just wanted to invite all of you guys to join us next Friday, May 1st at 11 a.m. I'm going to interview Ben Kinney. The following Thursday, I'm going to interview Bo and Kimber Mankiti. Really excited about that. We're going to do the same superpower exercise with all of them. This Wednesday, we're doing Wednesday webinars every Wednesday. And this Wednesday, I'm excited to tell you I have Brad Inman coming on as my first guest. And we have Diane Griffin and we have Brady Sandel coming on to talk about tactics right now, how to the goal in those Wednesday webinars is that you leave those webinars and immediately can implement what you learn. So we go over a lot of scripts and really tactical in the weeds stuff. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I was really excited about this interview. So it means a lot that so many of you decided to join us. And thank you again, Chris. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.